Y'all, it's time to hack the busy season. Let EveryPlate save you time and money with $2.99 meals. Give your budget a break this fall with affordable recipes from America's best value meal kit. Indulge in flavorful variety with EveryPlate's rotating menu of 26 weekly recipes you can count on to be delicious. Focus on making fall plans, not planning meals, with dinner options ready in 30 minutes or less. Save time with EveryPlate's tasty, no-fuss recipes and pre-portioned ingredients delivered to your door. You got a busy schedule? I do too. I get it. Save yourself a trip to the grocery store. Make it easy on yourself. Get grab-and-go snacks and easy-to-assemble lunches. Add them to your weekly box with EveryPlate. They got affordable dinners for $2.99 per serving on your first box. EveryPlate helps you save money for fall family fun. Y'all know I've been a big devotee of these services for a long time, and I mean that, not just saying it. So join EveryPlate today and pay only $2.99 per meal, plus get 50% off your first box for all box sizes. Get this amazing deal by going to everyplate.com/podcast and then entering the code POA299. That's code POA299 at everyplate.com/podcast.
Nancy Reagan had to say no to drugs, which is,
Yeah.
thanks for that. That really worked out nice. Pretty sure the war on drugs won real big.
Big time. One of the most crushing defeats in the history of war, I think, delivered by drugs in the war on drugs. All right, everybody. We're back, Airheads. We're here in the virtual Airstream studios, although you may have already ascertained, not if you're listening, though, because you haven't heard anything yet. Cho is now with us, no longer with us. He died yesterday, hit by a bus tragically outside of Chattanooga, Tennessee. But it's okay. We've replaced him already. You'll never see or hear from him again. Obviously, I'm joking. He's got strep throat, so he can't talk. His voice is out of commission. Hard to do a podcast when you can't talk. So we had to get a last-minute fill in, and we thought, who else has been on the show before? He's a longtime denizen of the extended Skewniverse. He's comedian, filmmaker, and raconteur Travis Irvine. You know him, you love him. What's up, T-Rav?
What up, Trae? Thanks for having me. Prayers up for Corey on a speedy recovery from getting hit by that bus.
Yeah, prayers up to him. I feel bad for the bus. If it hit him in the head, at least. I hope the bus is doing okay.
Right.
But anyway, I thought that, I appreciate you coming in on a last minute's notice like that. Corey got back from the doctor this morning, so shit happens. So I appreciate it. But I did think that last time you were on, we talked about presidents. You're like a president nerd, and presidents are obviously fancy. The White House is fancy. We feel like it's on brand for the show. And I don't know if you've heard. I don't know if you've been watching the news, but there's a big. We might have a new president in America. Well, we'll have a different president in America soon. There's a big election coming up around the corner, so we don't get political on this show, but it still seemed like it's the time of year. It's appropriate. We could talk about presidents and elections and that type of thing again without getting into any modern day culture war stuff, just like fun presidential anecdotes. So that's what I was thinking. But Corey likes to start with a segment he calls This Week in Fancy. And he sent me some of the links for it. So he picked these out. He curated these. I'm going to read a couple of them to you. We had a little false start right before we this is the second time we got on to record this. I showed you another link. I'm just going to skip that because it feels like a bit of a minefield to me. So I'll read some of these other ones to you. Do you like Idris Elba, Travis?
Oh, yeah. The real James Bond.
There you go. I like that. Yeah. A very suave, smooth operating British black actor who hits for pretty much everybody. Well, he is saying that he is going to move to Africa and start, or I don't know about start, but build an African Hollywood, an African movie industry. I mean, they already make some movies in Africa, but he wants to move there and be the Louis B. Mayer of African film, I guess. That's his plan. It says he's building a film studio on Zanzibar, which is that's one of those names that I've always thought sounds like it's just from like old adventure serials, but it's actually a real place,
Right. I just know it from the Tenacious D's song.
Yeah, right. I'm not going to cook it, but I'll order it from Zanzibar. Yeah. Fuck Her Gently. If you guys don't know it, look it up. It's a good one. You know anything about Zanzibar or Africa? You Africa dumb? What do you know about Africa?
Well, that's what's part of the old Travis Irvine vault, Trae. I don't know if we ever got to tell this story when we were on the road, but I actually worked in Nigeria for 3 months way back in 2010 for the New York Film Academy. Nigeria is home to the third or second largest film industry in the world. It's called Nollywood.
Nollywood. This is so weird. I think you did tell me that, but I'd completely forgotten. But that is obviously directly related to this story that Corey had already pulled up. It's so you have like firsthand experience with the African film industry. But yeah, Nollywood is mentioned in this article somewhere, which I did not realize. But yeah, it says, with Nigeria's Nollywood producing hundreds of movies a year, films are arguably one of the country's most successful exports. There's also a tradition, especially in parts of Francophone Africa, of making high-quality films. Elba has recognized the talent in Africa's film industry, but said the facilities were lacking. So he just wants to take it to the next level, I guess. But anyway, back to you, though. You lived and worked in Nollywood for a while. What was that like?
I mean, it was a wild time. 2010, I worked for the New York Film Academy, obviously located in New York City, and they launched a program with the government of Nigeria to start training film producers and filmmakers in Nigeria to make better Nollywood movies. At the time, the way Nollywood got very big was during the VHS era. What the filmmakers in Nigeria would do is they'd plop a tape into a VHS camera and just hit record, and they basically do a play in front of the camera. So all of the Nollywood movies for a long time were just that, and no edits, just one long wide shot like a play. But then they take the VHS tape out of the VHS recorder, and they'd make millions of copies, and Nollywood would make movies for all of Africa. That's why it became so big. So our job, my job specifically, was to teach Nigerian film students how to edit video, and basically you get a shot of one guy talking and another shot of another guy talking, and then you edit them together. And so we taught them Final Cut Pro and all those things. So it was a really beautiful experience, honestly, not just teaching all these Nigerian film students, but also the country was just astoundingly gorgeous, Trae. I can't tell you. So good on Idris Elba for trying to show the beauty of Africa and the talent of Africans, because he's absolutely right. They just don't really have the infrastructure right now. Beyond from when I was there, it was mostly VHS cameras.
So he says in this article that it's like, most African movies about Africa that other people see, it's one type of Africa. It's like, there's slavery and colonizing and suffering and pain and brutality and poverty and all that shit, right? And he says, and that's not what Africa's really like, generally speaking. People don't even realize that. So I was going to ask, like, what part of Nigeria were you in? Were you in the capital city, or were you in like a smaller city, or what?
Abuja, and it's located right in the middle, because for decades and years before, even leading up to when Nigeria was its own independent country, it was just a British colony, but there was a lot of infighting between the northern part of Nigeria, which is mostly Sahara Desert and tribes, and the southern part of Nigeria, which was oil rich. So the South would tend to run the entire country for a long time. And the idea of moving the capital to Abuja was to join the northern and southern areas and unite them. So it's hard to say, there's still some problems in Nigeria, both culturally, politically. Now and then there's some terrorist groups that run around. But for the most part, Abuja, it's a little sandy, it's a little dusty, but it was a beautiful town. And again, all my students were just really, really awesome. They called me Chop Knuckle, Trae. They gave me a nickname. I learned the Pidgin English, and Chop Knuckle is just like a fist bump. But Chop Knuckle in Pidgin English means eat knuckle. Chop Knuckle.
Nice.
That's what they
Chop
call
Knuckle. Oh, Chop Knuckle Irvine. That's pretty good. Yeah, the biggest city there is Lagos, right? Did you ever go down there?
No, everyone told us that we should have done the program there, because that is like the New York or LA of Nigeria.
Yeah.
Super oil rich. Again, Abuja is like the DC, basically.
Yeah. So, but I don't know. Like, how different, I don't know how to ask this without sounding like an ignorant ass white American, but it's like, how third worldy or whatever it, how metropolitan and shit is it versus what people think? Like, is it, how modern. I mean, yeah, and you haven't been there for 14 years now, I guess, but still,
Right.
like just how wrong are the stereotypes? People don't even. I feel like a lot of people in this country don't even think of Africa as having cities. You know what I mean?
Right.
They don't even realize that. So I mean, that's how backwards we are. So.
Yeah, and I don't want to give a fully backwards answer, but it does remind me of when I travel to like Central American cities in terms of the metropolitan areas. Like, sure, like there's areas that have trash and the houses look impoverished, and all the cars, like there's so many buses, right? Then the buses are just like packed. That's how people get around in the Nigerian cities. A lot of motorcycles, a lot of smog because a lot of the infrastructure is old infrastructure, right? So I don't want to give a typical white American answer, but yeah, the metropolitan areas are a little dirty, but then you get outside of those areas, and again, just the nature, the natural landscape is absolutely astounding. And again, we were staying in nice areas. We stayed at a nice Sheraton hotel there in Abuja. And it was interesting because I remember the New York Film Academy organizers, like the people who were in charge of the program, being like, never leave the hotel complex. And they weren't wrong in some regard. Like there were definitely like people hanging out around and inside that area trying to like actively kidnap us. They
right. Okay. Yeah.
they weren't successful, but it was just like, I have a taxi, come outside. Do you want to see it? You be careful of that. But then like I went out again as chopped knuckle to go out with my film students. They're like, no, you should leave the hotel. You should come see how awesome our city is. And I had a great time. Shout out to Wally and Femi and all my Nigerian students that got me out of the hotel and took me on some cool places to experience the Nigerian nightlife.
So yeah, he opened this up, Airheads, by saying this is from the Irvine Vault or whatever. He's one of these people that's like always. I've known him for years and years now, and every now and then he'll say some random sounding shit like that I'd never heard before. Where it's like, you also weren't you like a surfing instructor in the Bahamas or something like that for a while, or?
Yeah, not surfing, but scuba diving, snorkeling, and marine biology.
Yeah, right. Excuse me. Sorry. But yeah, and then you've run for governor of Ohio, and made multiple movies, two Killer Raccoon movies, and all kinds of other wacky and wild stuff. You're a singular individual, Mr. Irvine. So here's the other news from this week in fancy. They can't stop rogue gamekeepers in the UK from murdering birds. Not just any birds, but like birds of prey, raptors, falcons, hawks, owls, eagles, birds you're not supposed to shoot. The reason that people keep shooting these birds in the UK is because those birds keep eating the birds that you are supposed to shoot. So pheasants and grouse and partridges, these are birds that people hunt in England. They go out on estates and they go grousing or pheasant hunting, and people pay to do it. You pay to go out on an estate and go bird hunting. And these murder birds keep eating those birds, and that don't hit for the rich people that own these estates because they need those birds alive so that people can pay to shoot them. So they are instead shooting the owls and the eagles and stuff, even though that is very illegal. It says that there's been a few arrests over the years, but only one person has ever been jailed in the past 15 years. 62 prosecutions. So people are starting to get pissed off, saying that something needs to actually happen about this. Or bird watchers in particular, pretty upset. There's a story in this article about a bird watcher in England who's like, it's kind of funny to imagine. He was like out birding. Bird watching, and he caught sight of a beautiful owl soaring through the air, which I imagine is like a real treat, a real find for a bird watcher. And as he's tracking it in his, bird lens, it just kind of goes poof and explodes into a cloud of feathers because some old boy hiding in a duck blind shot it out of the sky right in front of this guy. So that's what they're dealing with over there. Where are you at on all that?
Man, rich people got rich people problems. I mean, again, as you noted, I worked in the Bahamas. I am an environmentalist. We used to do bird watching there in the Bahamas. Lots of beautiful birds head down to the Caribbean during the winter months. But yeah, this is just one of those rich people fighting with other murder birds about which birds they can all murder together.
Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like I don't know. I feel like I don't know. Shoot, like I think they basically breed the prey birds to be shot. You know, it's like going to a pay lake or something with cat. They keep it stocked with catfish. I'm sure they keep these birds stocked, and they don't want these predators eating their stock. I get that, but it's like those are bred for people to pay to shoot. But like, you know, the wild predator birds, I do think they ought not shoot those, generally speaking. Maybe find some other kind of mechanism. I don't know what it'd be. A big-ass scarecrow, a particularly scary scarecrow, a scare owl, a scare eagle, something like that.
Right. Well, no, but again, it's just like, who's got time to go shoot birds? This is where I'm just like, this is a problem that only applies to the fancy rich people that you guys cover on this show. You know, I mean, is the visual image of an owl, you know, soaring majestically through the air and then exploding
just
into
going poof, yeah,
like a pillow fight. Is that comical to me? Yeah, absolutely. But the environmentalist, you know, and me, you know, I sympathize with the British people seeing these images and clutching their pearls and worry over the murder birds.
You ever hunted at all?
Does fishing count? I feel like fishing.
No,
like
fishing.
Hunting.
Well, hunting and fishing are two separate types of sportsmaning, outdoorsmanship, whatever. So no, I mean, I fucked around in the woods a little bit with my friends when I was a kid, hunting for squirrels and shit. But that's really it. I mean, I'm from a big hunting place, but I was a fat, lazy dork, and I did not want to get up at 4:30 in the morning in November when it's freezing fucking cold and go sit in a tree for hours just hoping to shoot something. I ain't got no problem shooting people. Like, I know a lot of people, like, you know, liberals and stuff, especially, they get a little pissy about hunting, but I think even a lot of ecologists and stuff will tell you that depending on the scenario, a lot of times hunting is a good thing. Some of the things that people hunt need to be culled because they'll fuck up the ecosystem otherwise if they're not, and so many other. Plus, nature is brutal, and honestly, a lot of times a bullet from a hunter is like arguably one of the best ends you can come to in the wild. I mean, legitimately, even if you live to be an old age, you're going to slowly starve to fucking death or get slowly picked apart by something that isn't old like you are anymore. Like, it ends bad every time is what I'm saying. So, you know, if you can just that or just get popped, you know, I think a lot of people might choose getting popped. So I don't have a problem with hunting at all. I don't like the cold, and I'm not a morning person. That's really all it is. But I was with a guy last week. He opens for me sometimes on the road, and he's an avid hunter and sportsman. And he was driving us, and he listens to a lot of hunting podcasts. And actually, one of the biggest hunting podcasts I've been a guest on before, called Meat Eater, with Steve Ranella. Good guy, good program. I really don't know why the hell they had me on there. I told him, I was like, I don't know shit about hunting, but they don't just talk about hunting. But anyway, listening to these hunting stories and listening to these hunters talk about it, it is kind of fascinating. I do sort of see the appeal. I don't think I'm going to go out of my way to do it because I do like fishing. I'm from a lake town, and fishing is my shit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just don't see myself ever really getting around to it. But I didn't even know. I know, you know, in England, like the real fancy people, they hunt foxes, which a lot of people think that's fucked up. You know,
right? Yeah, they got the horses and the dogs.
Yeah, right. They dress all, you know, proper with their
British, very
Britishy. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm in the same boat. I mean, you know, I got my libertarian or libertarian roots, so I've seen friends with gun collections. So I'm just like, that's crazy. But beyond shooting pumpkins, that's what I used to like to do. We used to just get a bunch of pumpkins. Stack them at the gun range because we had an outdoor gun range there in southeastern Ohio, and that was kind of like my hillbilly phase, where we just blow the hell out of these pumpkins. But yeah, to shoot a living thing, I just don't know if I have it in me. Fishing, I remember an old 90s stand-up comedy bit about how fishing is more of a prank than it is hunting, right?
Yeah.
Just like, you want some food? Oh, there's a hook in there. Gotcha, right? And I've done plenty of fishing. Yeah, lakes and creeks and streams in Ohio, but then also the Bahamas. Oh, baby. If you want some big fish, some mahi, some marlins type stuff, you and I can hop down to the Bahamas sometime and head out there.
I've always wanted to do that deep sea fishing stuff. You get like strapped into a fucking harness on a boat and go to war with a fish with a sword for a nose. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love that shit. I mean, I've never done it. It looks awesome. I'd like to do it. Anyway, that has been This Week in Fancy. Hey, have you heard that the flavored air category is quickly becoming the leading alternative to vaping and smoking? It's a whole new movement towards better habits, and it's being led by the sponsor of today's show, Fume. All right, that's right. Fume is an award-winning flavored air device. Flavored air is not the same as vaping. If you compared vapor to sticky soda, Fume cores are more like herbal teas. Fume has a lot of delicious flavors for you to choose from, like crisp mint and orange vanilla. With flavored air, you can satisfy your oral fixation through a passive diffusion system that utilizes no electronics, vapor, or combustion. Fume draws the flavor to your mouth. Fume fills the void ditching a bad habit can leave. You still got something there to reach for and to put in there. Fume is not a vape. No vapor at all. You can use it anywhere you want. There's no nicotine. It's not addictive. It's got non-toxic flavors. It's a completely guilt-free alternative. Also, it's not another thing you're going to have to add to your list of devices to charge. There's no batteries. You never have to charge it. It looks very cool. It's got a weighted, high-quality design that's made for you to fidget with. It's got magnets and snaps and clicks. It's fun on its own. It helps to calm anxiety that comes with, getting rid of a bad habit. Fume continuously invests in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products and is backed by doctors right here in the U.S. of A. Me personally, I've always been a fruit guy, and I'm sure you're like, oh, really? That's surprising. Oh, color me shocked, Trae. You fruity, but I do like fruity stuff. I do. I'm more of orange vanilla is my go-to. Who don't like a creamsicle? You know what I mean? That's my favorite. I mean, the mint ones are refreshing as well. I'm just more of a fruit type of feller, so I like to opt for the orange vanilla option while using Fume. And the little thing itself, the device itself is very cool. You just want to sort of play with it. It's nice. So here's what you can do. Fume has served over 300,000 customers, and you can be the next success story. For a limited time, use our code POA to get a free gift with your journey pack. Head to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com and use the code POA or scan the QR code on screen to get a free gift with your order today. All right, I want to tell you about True Classic. Dude, I've always thought that I'm an odd-shaped man. I'm sure many of you would probably agree. But I've got kind of long, gangly arms and a relatively long torso, but I'm also a doughy sunbuck, and it's just I just don't have a traditional shape. That's part of a lot of y'all out there are guilty of shaming me and giving me hell for wearing the same clothes over and over. The reason I do that is because it's hard for me to find clothes that actually fit me well. It's very hard. It's been a constant struggle, and that's why I'm thrilled to have found True Classic, right? Because it's just the clothes that fit right, and you can just as soon as you put on something and it fits right, you just feel it, right? Well, that's how True Classic is. It's like having something that's like tailored, and I've done that before. I'm jumped up trash, so I've had a thing or two tailored here and there, and that's always incredible. But it's obviously so expensive. True Classic is like having a tailored fit, but without the expensive price tag. That's right. That's what it is. They got True Classic as a clothing brand. They have best-selling T-shirts, hoodies, jeans. You can get them in packs of 3, 6, 9. Damn, she fine. Premium products at an affordable price. All right. They're shirts that design your best features with a perfect fit. So like as a man, where you want it to be snug, arms, chest, been swole, you've been lifting, right? But you got room in the belly, right? I mean, we all get that. I mean, I'm a pushing 40 dad. I know what's up. We all rocking the dad bod out here. These shirts are made for dad bods. That's what they are. But they got some fall must-haves for you. Long sleeve Henleys, waffle hoodies, jeans, button-ups, joggers, whatever you want. Moisture wicking, quick dry, odor control, active wear. You can mix and match clothing to work with your lifestyle. 100% perfect fit guarantee and easy returns True Classic is trusted by over 4 million customers, and you can check out the over 200,000 reviews if you don't believe me. Fall is here, y'all. It's time to step up your game. Right now, you can unlock big savings when you bundle packs. Just go to our exclusive link at trueclassic.com/POA to save. That's trueclassic.com/POA. One more time, trueclassic.com/POA. Shop now and elevate your wardrobe today. There you go. So let's get into it. I asked you beforehand to, if you didn't mind, come with some of your favorite presidential anecdotes. So I guess we can just start there, and then I'll ask you some questions along the way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think last time we were on a President's Day back in February. Earlier this year, we kind of highlighted some of the more fancy presidents. Martin Van Buren, of course, was only beaten because he was born with a silver spoon in his mouth. He was our 8th president, for anybody who doesn't know. And, I mean, throughout the years, there's been a lot of fancy rich fellas who have held that office. So I didn't know if there's any particular ones you wanted to highlight. There's also some wacky elections, when guys like Martin Van Buren would actually run.
Tell us about some of those, since we got an election coming up, and there's some people in this country who think it might turn a little wacky, although wacky is maybe not the best word to use. It's not given the mood that a lot of people, I don't know if we'd call it a zany, all these hijinks going on. It's those might be too whimsical of terms to use for our current situation. But if you got some wacky election tales for us, let's go.
Well, my first election I wanted to highlight, and we kind of can go in chronological order, but this one's always one of the most first fascinating ones, was the election of 1800 that pitted after George Washington served 2 terms, and then in 1796, these were still the days, Trae, when our electoral system would have 2 main candidates. But they wouldn't have a political party, right? They'd have factions of the populace behind them, but there were no actual political parties yet. And in 1796, we still had the system of the first place winner of the Electoral College vote, which at that time still did mostly align with the popular vote. I know that's not always been the case in American history. But the first place winner becomes president. And then his mortal enemy, the second place winner, becomes vice president.
Yeah, right. I know. When did that finally stop? Because I know that through Andrew Jackson, Martin Van Buren, John C. Calhoun was his vice president, and they fucking hated each other. And then Martin Van Buren was in his cabinet, and they became homies, and that was part of how Van Buren ended up being the president after that. But how long did they do that system that way? Because it seems like that's just such a It just feels like that would be such an obviously bad idea, I would think, from the beginning. And generally speaking, I'm of the opinion that our founding fathers were pretty smart, pretty sharp dudes. I don't know how they didn't see that one coming. So,
right. Well, that's why you have amendments, right? That's why you. And so the election of 1800 was the impetus that led to that 12th Amendment. That is the amendment that did change the system of how the president and vice president were elected. Now, after that, in the election of 1804, the president and vice president would run together on the same ticket. But in 1800, you still had that old-timey system, so they hadn't yet changed it. And what it did, and this is why it's kind of important to this election, in 1796, your top 2 guys, again, is John Adams, became our nation's 2nd president, and his mortal enemy, another rich guy, which, by the way, both these guys are rich guys. John Adams, a Massachusetts rich guy. And his second place runner-up, his vice president, was Thomas Jefferson, a Virginia rich guy, right? But 2 very ideologically different candidates for president in terms of Adams wanted a strong federal government, right? And Jefferson was a Jeffersonian Democrat, per se, as they kind of called it there in the decades after, where he wanted more things left up to the states. So in 1796, Adams beat Jefferson. Jefferson is the vice president. And then 1800 comes, and of course, they're going to run against each other again. That's almost what we had this year, right? With a current president and his main contender running against each other. But 1800, and this time around, Thomas Jefferson beat John Adams. And this was serious for a couple reasons. it did eventually lead to the 12th Amendment and the rule change in terms of the presidential elections. But B, this was the election that another rich guy, a fellow who was so rich they call him King George III from across the ocean, kind of tying back to some of the stuff we're talking about with things getting a little Britishy. King George III was watching the election of 1800, and when he saw that Jefferson beat his president, John Adams, King George III was like, let's see what John Adams does. Meaning King George III thought the American experience, very, very new at that time, or the American experiment, still very new at that time, was about to come to a crumbling halt because he thought, no way will John Adams walk away from power, right, in defeat.
Right.
And John Adams
but
was very...
hadn't George Washington already done that? Like, didn't they? Like, didn't some people want George Washington to just stay the president, basically become a kind of dictator or king or whatever, but he refused to do it? That's what I've always heard. Is that true?
Yeah, so George Washington left after 2 terms, which eventually set the precedent, but it was never law. It wasn't a law until after Franklin Delano Roosevelt got elected 4 times. But George Washington actively stepped away after 2 terms. So he didn't actually lose an election, but he did step away from the power of the presidency. And at that time, John Adams got it in 1796 after Washington. But so, yeah, Washington did kind of set the tone, right? A president setting precedents. But John Adams was your first defeat, like a sitting president was defeated. And again, rich guy versus rich guy. We all know how the founding fathers were. You had to have some money to be in the room where it happens, as they say in Hamilton. But it was interesting because then they proved to the very rich guy, the monarch, King George III, overseas, that in fact, one rich guy can be another rich guy. And the rich guy, John Adams, he set a precedent, which until 2020, and January 6, 2021, was the peaceful transfer of power. And John Adams left the White House and got in his carriage and went back to Massachusetts to live in private life.
Yeah, suck on that, King George.
Yeah.
Showed that motherfucker. Wasn't he like crazy, King George, kind of? Like, didn't he have something up with his brain? Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I feel like they're all crazy. I feel like all the monarchs, all the inbreeding, eventually it catches up with you. So, yeah. But the election 1800 very much on my radar in terms of rich guy versus rich guy. But then after that, yes, you're absolutely right. By 1804, they figured it out. And they were like, we cannot be having the president and vice president hating each other. So in 1804, the ticket that Jefferson won re-election on, he had a vice president he actually liked, and that guy was named Aaron Burr. And, of course, he got along with everybody real famously well, but that's another story for another day.
Well, I know for a fact that Andrew Jackson and John C. Calhoun couldn't fucking stand each other, but they were in the White House together. I thought it was one of those situations. They actually ran together, but hated each other. Like, what was the story there?
Honestly, I would defer to you more on that one. But I do know when Martin Van Buren was defeated, he was defeated by William Henry Harrison, who had Ohio roots. He was born in Virginia, technically was governor of the Indiana Territory. He was famous for beating Tecumseh at the Battle of Tippecanoe, so he had the nickname Tippecanoe. But yeah, you are right. That was still an era when even if you had a Democrat ticket, I mean, not to fast forward too much, but Lyndon Johnson and John F. Kennedy hated each other too. That was just a ticket of pure convenience of aligning the Northern liberal Democrat with the Southern Dixiecrat Democrats to win the election in 1960. But yeah, that's something that happens all the time. In terms of William Henry Harrison, his vice president was a dude named John Tyler, and they ran with the Whig Party. And if you think political parties, like minor political parties like the Libertarians and Green Party, are disorganized, the Whigs were a very interesting class of political parties back in that day. Because again, after the Jefferson years, you kind of had your Federalists versus anti-Federalists, but eventually a new political party, kind of a hodgepodge called the Whigs. They would usually run like an old general, like William Henry Harrison, and then attach a statesman to him, like John Tyler, which was William Henry Harrison's vice president. They ran under the banner of Tippy Canoe and Tyler too. But William Henry Harrison, at 68, 69 years old, he was the oldest president elected at the time. And, of course, he's famous for dying 30 days later after being inaugurated because he talked too long in the rain. Some say an ancient curse of Tecumseh to ruin his presidency, and ruin it did. But it is funny because then John Tyler, I mean, this was a day when the vice president had, like, nothing to do except just sit around and wait for the president to die. And John Tyler had to wait all but 30 days. And he hated the Whigs, and he hated being president. So he was kind of like your first independent president ever. Like he didn't give the Whigs what they wanted. He didn't give the Democrats at the time what they wanted either. So it's hard to say if he necessarily like hated Harrison or got along with him or not. But he wasn't having anybody's bullshit even back then.
Let me just hit you with a couple random presidents. Chester A. Arthur. What do you know about him?
Great mutton chops, baby. What a great set of chops. Another guy who became president only because he was the vice president to another fellow there, and another Ohio president. It is funny. A lot of Ohio presidents led to vice presidents becoming president, even though you never heard of the vice president. James Garfield was a very interesting character in terms of he wasn't just a big fat orange cat who hated Mondays and loved lasagna. He was actually a very learned intellectual. So the Republicans were in real disarray as of 1880 because the South was kind of starting to rise again, if you will, after the end of Reconstruction. So they really scrambled to get James Garfield elected. It took them 25 ballots at the Republican convention that year in 1880. James Garfield, just an Ohio congressman, and he essentially got the nomination thanks to backroom deals. It was still during the days where you could do that. And on the 25th ballot became the Republican nominee for president, and then he went on to win. But part of the way they united the Republican factions was attaching Chester A. Arthur onto the ticket, and Chester A. Arthur came out of New York. And a lot of people say that Chester A. Arthur was only attached, again, to the ticket to appease the harbor master. It had some fancy term, a fellow who he wanted to control James Garfield. James Garfield refused to be controlled, even though this New York power broker helped Garfield get the nomination. So a lot of people think there may be some conspiracies.
All right. So let's see here. What's your favorite Teddy Roosevelt fact or anecdote? Because I feel like there's a bunch of them. People have strong opinions about Teddy Roosevelt. He's kind of the man, the myth, the legend type of feller. As a presidential scholar of sorts, what's the straight dope on Teddy Roosevelt?
Oh man, I could do a whole show on Teddy Roosevelt because he was a rich, fancy guy. He came from a rich, fancy New York City family. But the cool thing about Teddy Roosevelt is he actually actively chose to reject a lot of that stuff. He joined the military, specifically a branch of the military back then called the cavalry, where they rode around horses and whatnot. This is obviously pre-vehicle times. And Teddy Roosevelt actually became a hero in the Spanish-American War there before returning to New York and entering New York politics on his family's legacy. So Teddy Roosevelt, tons of cool stories about that guy, his military background, the fact that, again, he actually was a police commissioner of New York City before eventually becoming governor of New York. And as governor of New York, the fascinating thing with Teddy Roosevelt was he was a conservative, he was a Republican, but he was an anti-monopoly guy. He hated the big businesses because in his brain, conservatism meant everyone gets a fair shot. They get an equal opportunity. So Teddy Roosevelt was known as a corporation buster as governor of New York. And so what the big Wall Street interest of New York did was they said, hey, get this guy out of here. And that's how they, again, attached him to another shitty Ohio president named William McKinley. And Teddy Roosevelt obviously became McKinley's vice president. The Wall Street guys got Teddy Roosevelt out of New York, and To their dismay, it turns out William McKinley also assassinated, and Teddy Roosevelt becomes more powerful than ever, becomes president of the United States. And that's when you really got to see him do a lot of his corporation busting, monopoly busting. That was pretty much standard stuff under a Republican Teddy Roosevelt. I'd like to throw out two more stories about Teddy that I love.
All right.
Another one was from the Irvine Vault. You know, I was working in Wyoming in 2020 on some campaigns there during the pandemic when we all had nothing else to do except, you know, hop on Zooms and do each other's podcasts. But we went to a little town in South Dakota where they had all these stories about the time Teddy Roosevelt came to visit. He was campaigning there. He came through on the train. You know, that was the way the presidential candidates used to try to, you know, earn everyone's votes. You'd go on a cross-country tour on the back of a train. And Teddy Roosevelt went to this little town in South Dakota. They stopped there. They still got the gazebo. I got pictures of it. I can send them to you. That Teddy Roosevelt made his big speech at. And, you know, the townspeople all gathered from miles around. And then Teddy Roosevelt was supposed to go to some big fancy luncheon you know, kind of organized by the people who are in charge of the whole area, the rich people in town. But instead, Teddy Roosevelt opted to skip that and went and hung out with the local train workers and rode horses. Like, they rode horses around town. And he ate, like, you know, the common people food. And this is, you know, one of those things where it really ingrained Teddy Roosevelt into the town lore, because instead of going and hanging out with the power brokers of the town, he went and hung out with the common folks and ate their food, rode their horses before getting back on the train. And he skipped the fancy luncheon entirely. So that's probably favorite Teddy Roosevelt story number 2. And the last, this one, obviously, James Adomian, a fellow comedian of ours, very talented, very funny, also in features in our movie Killer Raccoons 2, Dark Christmas in the Dark. James Adomian just did a great act out. You can see it on his social media of Teddy Roosevelt getting shot, which didn't happen until after he was already president. Teddy Roosevelt, talk about presidents who used to be president and then running for president again, which links to a lot of what we're dealing with today, although Teddy Roosevelt obviously was a much better character, much better person than our current situation. But Teddy Roosevelt actually ran for president again in 1912, and he was supposed to make a speech in Milwaukee, and he was shot in the chest, but his speech that he had in his pocket was so thick that it actually stopped the bullet's momentum. The bullet still went into his chest and was lodged there and stayed lodged there for the rest of his life. But Teddy Roosevelt famously pulled out this speech that had, you know, thick speech and had a bullet hole through it. He actively forgave his would-be assassin there on the spot. Obviously, the man did go to jail eventually, but Teddy Roosevelt still forgave him. And then Teddy Roosevelt went and finished his speech before even going to the hospital. That's what kind of a badass Teddy Roosevelt was. So
yeah, he said
fancy
it
guy.
takes more than that to kill a bull moose. Isn't that what he supposedly said in that moment?
I mean,
he lost that election though, right?
Yes.
The one where yeah, right.
It is interesting. He did lose the election, but he was probably one of the most successful third-party candidates for president in American history. Essentially what happened was, you know, after Teddy got the presidency with McKinley being assassinated, he ran for re-election. He won, and then he felt good about things, so he handed over the keys to the castle to one of his most trusted administration officials, William Taft, who was another Ohio president, known for being the fattest president. Apparently got stuck in a bathtub at one point. But Teddy Roosevelt was so disappointed in the way that William Taft ran the presidency, ran his administration, ran the country, that sure enough, you know, 4 years after leaving office, Teddy Roosevelt ran again against Taft, specifically against Taft. And this led, because they split the votes, this led to Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat out of Virginia, being elected in 1912. But Teddy Roosevelt famously got more votes than William Howard Taft. So, you know, these were two guys who were really good friends for a long time throughout Roosevelt's presidency. They had a huge falling out, obviously, when Teddy ran against Taft in 1912 and then got more votes than the sitting president. But down the line, as you could read about this in Doris Kearns Goodwin's great book, The Bully Pulpit, Taft and Roosevelt did eventually repair their friendship and remained very good friends until Teddy Roosevelt's death.
All right, let me ask you this. Drunkest president.
Oh, buddy. Woo! You know I'm about to say another Ohio president. That moniker belongs to Ulysses S. Grant.
That's what I thought you were going to say, yeah.
Yes.
Didn't he get like the first DUI ever given in D.C., Washington, D.C., went to Ulysses S. Grant, which is like, obviously pre-car DUI. He got like DUI in a carriage or something.
On his horse. Yeah, he was, that's the thing, man. You gotta respect some of these presidents who had the gall to ride horses. Here we are talking about how we can't even go hunting. But Ulysses S. Grant, what Ulysses S. Grant did was, again, this is a guy who saw the worst of the Civil War. He rose through the ranks. It's just out of Cincinnati. As a West Point grad, wasn't even like first in his class by any means. Robert E. Lee was objectively a more trained general and came out of West Point with more awards and everything. But Ulysses S. Grant, he saw the worst of it and worked his way to the top and then won the Civil War. But a lot of people said that this is what led to his drinking. He wasn't so much like, I'm going to drink all the time and be secretly drunk. He was more of I'm going to do this job for 5 days and then I'm going out to the woods with my buddies and I'm getting hammered, and like, don't bother me. But so the incident where he did ride his horse somehow too fast, too furious for DC standards in the 1800s and got pulled over for it. They do think that he might have been pretty hammered when he was doing that, or he just didn't give a shit because he was the president. Ulysses S. Grant, by far known for being a guy who liked to, again, not drink all the time subtly, but more of I'm going on a bender and there's nothing you can do about it. But at the same time, that guy kept the Union together. The Republicans all knew that to beat one of your Tennessee presidents, Andrew Johnson, who was famously one of the most corrupt, corrupt vice presidents.
He pretty much ruined everything that Lincoln had worked towards in the wake of his death and all that, and just fucked everything up. Like, things could have been infinitely better than they were if not for Andrew Johnson being the man in the position at the time. Go Vols.
So Ulysses S. Grant, if you can imagine a drunk from Cincinnati having to clean up Andrew Johnson's mess, that is the situation that he inherited. But overall, he did a pretty good job. Functional alcoholics, they're just like us. Yeah.
It is weird how some people can just function. It'll still kill you eventually either way, but like some people, just end up sleeping in a gutter, and then some people like run a high-powered law firm for 40 years when they're both and they're both drunk as fuck all the time. It is strange how that works. Okay, Millard Fillmore. What's he about? What's that guy's deal? I don't know anything about Millard Fillmore. He's got one of the funnier names in presidential history.
Yeah, I remember a cartoon called Millard Fillmore, which was it was a duck who covered politics. That was one of my favorite cartoons to read in the paper, even though I don't think I understood any of the jokes. But it's fun because you're dropping a lot of guys who literally were vice president, had, they would have just been lost to the annals of history, if you will. And Millard Fillmore was yet another one of those, talking about Whigs. The Whigs, again, nominated a famous general named Zachary Taylor. Zachary Taylor won the presidency and became a Whig former general president. But then, just like the other former Whig general presidents, he died in office. And that's what gave us Millard Fillmore. There's not too many famous things that happened during Millard Fillmore's presidency per se. Obviously, 1840s, 1850s presidents, they were just all kind of dealing with that north-south divide, and everybody just kind of, slowly trying to keep the keg from blowing up the way it eventually did.
Right.
But the fascinating thing for me about Millard Fillmore was he was a New York president, right? So especially with the exception of Andrew Jackson, most of America's first presidents were all from Virginia, Massachusetts, or New York.
Yeah.
And Millard Fillmore was part of that New York ilk. But and again, after his presidency, he was part of this group that once the Whigs started to crumble because they were already a very shaky political alliance anyway, and the abolitionists started to go and form this radical third party called the Republican Party that was basically anti-slavery. Some of the Whigs instead went off and started an anti-Masonic political party, which was known as the Know Nothings.
Yeah, it's so weird you said, because I was about to bring this up. So this is related. This is during Millard Fillmore's time. The Know Nothings becoming a thing.
It was after. In fact, you could even argue that the breakup of the Whigs came after Millard Fillmore's presidency. Maybe even brought upon the fact that Zachary Taylor died in office and Millard Fillmore was such a feckless president. But eventually the Whigs crumbled and split into these two different groups: the abolitionists or the Republican Party, and then the pure racists, which was the anti-Masonic Know Nothings. And Millard Fillmore did eventually run for president, and I think he got electoral votes. He didn't win, but he was the anti-Masonic Know Nothing candidate for president. And they were nicknamed the Know Nothings because they were so racist and over the top that when asked, what their nefarious purposes were, what else they were maybe up to when they weren't in the public eye, they all said, "I know nothing."
Yeah, I knew that they were not overly effective or anything, and I just always remember them because it's such a funny name for a party, the Know Nothing Party. It's like doesn't seem like putting your best foot forward. It's not giving the best impression generally, so it always was funny to me. But I didn't never really know what they were about, so they were just like slavery rules and white people are awesome. That was their platform. Well,
the Democrats kind of had that platform down, right? The Dixiecrats. So this was more of a northern version of that. And especially, Millard Fillmore, there were, and we all know this, but, in the lead up to the Civil War, there's a lot of people who were anti-slavery, but they still did not like black people.
Of course.
Things like the draft riots in New York City were proof of that, obviously, where, again, as free men started to move to these northern states, all these northern states were still doing really awful racist shit. So, Millard Fillmore was part of that ilk. And again, their official name was not the Know Nothings. That was just kind of became their nickname, essentially.
Y'all, what do you know about metabolism? Probably not much, right? I know I didn't. It's one of them things, it's like when you first learn about it as a kid, and you're like, wait, so this is a thing that kind of means everything then. This is like one of the most important parts of my entire biology, and I don't understand it at all. That's good. Right? That's how I felt when I first learned about metabolism, but you don't have to feel that way anymore because of our sponsor, Lumen. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath, and on the app, it'll let you know if you're burning fat or carbs, and it gives you tailored guidance to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you got to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism, whether you're burning fat or carbs. Then Lumen will give you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on what your measurements are. If you want, you can breathe into it before or after you go to work out or have a meal or go to sleep or whatever, and it will give you feedback on your body in real time and give you tips to stay on top of your health game. Okay, your metabolism is your body's engine. It's how your body turns the food you eat into fuel that keeps you going, right? Like I said, your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does. So optimal metabolic health translates to a whole slew of benefits. Weight management, energy levels are better, fitness results, you sleep better. Lumen gives you recommendations to improve your metabolic health with each breath. Lumen's recommendations are designed to improve your pre- and post-workout fueling for better performance and recovery so you can power through your toughest workouts and add on that muscle mass, baby. Get swole. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/POA to get 15% off your Lumen. That is LUMEN.me/POA for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring the show. Oh, man, I tell you what, as a kid, I sure did love cereal. I was a big old fat kid, too. So I ate that cereal, ate them whole bowl of cookies and milk and called it cereal. The 90s were a heck of a time, man. All that good sugar making us fat, slowing our blood down. It was great. But as an adult, I realized you can't live like that. You can't just eat bowls of sugar all day. Well, I mean, we got jobs. You can't have that. And then, but you still want cereal, but cereal don't, as a man, you need protein. You can't get protein from cereal, right? That's what I thought. Then I found Magic Spoon, a nostalgically delicious cereal that tastes just like my childhood favorites, but without the sugar and with a ton of protein as well. If you already like Magic Spoon, I got big news for you. They've turned their super popular cereal into high protein treats that are light, crispy, and taste just like classic crunchy cereal bars. Magic Spoon's brand new treats are so delicious and have already become perhaps my very favorite before working out snack. That's right. I love them. They got the little marshmallows and stuff in there. It's like, the treats we're talking about, the very famous cereal treats. These are like that, except they got protein in them and not as much, they hit harder for you and they taste very good as well. Okay. Listen, as far as the cereal, every serving of Magic Spoon cereal has 13 grams of protein, 0 grams of sugar, and 4 grams of net carbs, so you can feel good about what you're eating. The most popular flavors are fruity and cocoa, and there's so many more. As far as the treats, Magic Spoon's brand new treats are crispy, crunchy, airy, and an easy way to get 12 grams of protein on the go. For the first time ever, Magic Spoon treats are available in grocery stores with delicious flavors like marshmallow and chocolatey peanut butter. I already told you I love them. They just, you don't want to eat too much before working out. I don't, but you want to get some protein in, you get a little extra energy, a little extra boost, especially if you're going to be lifting that day. And these Magic Spoon treats are absolutely perfect for that. And they have the added bonus of tasting good as well. Anytime you put chocolate and peanut butter together, your boy is there. All right. So a big fan. Here's what you can do. Get $5 off your next order at magicspoon.com/POA or look for Magic Spoon on Amazon or in your nearest grocery store. That's magicspoon.com/POA for $5 off. Magic Spoon. Hold on to the dream, baby. Who's the most underrated president in your opinion? So you can't say like Washington or Lincoln or anybody or FDR or anybody like that because they get their shine. So who's somebody that you don't think most people realize was actually pretty solid, pretty good at presidenting?
Yeah. Ooh, that's a good question there. I don't know. Is Dwight D. Eisenhower, is he too famous? I mean,
I don't know. I mean, he's definitely famous because World War II, and then the 50s were the era of whatever when the U.S. rose to superpowerdom and all that, and the economy was booming and all that shit. And it was a great time to be an American if you were white. But I don't think he's put on the level of like the big uns. You know what I mean? The Roosevelts and Washington and Lincoln and even JFK.
Yeah. No, I think Eisenhower. Well, in that case, yeah, I'd go with Eisenhower because I even think about the current state of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
And I look back at like the last 100 years, I guess. And Dwight D. Eisenhower was like the only good Republican. Like that's the last Republican that I would have voted for until Donald Trump. Until Trump came along, Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first American president who got elected having no public service experience whatsoever. He literally was, like you said, a military general. He went from
I thought you just said that the Whigs always picked a military general to run for president.
Well, but in terms of like modern times, in terms of not being elected to anything whatsoever, Eisenhower had military service, but then he went and became president of my alma mater, Columbia University. Another thing from the Irvine Vault. I somehow have a master's in journalism from that place, but that's what Dwight D. Eisenhower used then for being a general to then being president of Columbia University. Then he ran straight for president from there and beat a Democrat named Adlai Stevenson. He beat him twice, actually. Again, kind of hints of this year's election. But Dwight D. Eisenhower, he was a guy who he served in the military, right? Wasn't elected to any other offices, I guess is more what I mean. But even his military experience, prepared him to, he built the Eisenhower highway system, right? Before that, America literally was just country roads all across. That's how you had to get across America. So They kind of borrowed the highway system that they saw in Europe and brought it to America, improved upon it. He also desegregated the schools down in the South. He was the one who sent in the National Guard at the Little Rock Five. That was Dwight D. Eisenhower. And then on his way out, another thing that I love, despite having a robust military career, he was the one in his farewell address who warned against the military-industrial complex.
That's right. Yeah, very famous speech.
Very famous, and that's what he said publicly, right, on his way out. For every bomb, for every tank that gets made, I'm paraphrasing here, of course, another school goes unfunded, and so on and so forth. But even like privately, he saw what the military-industrial complex was trying to do in the 1950s as the Cold War kind of ramped up.
Right.
And Dwight D. Eisenhower was apparently known for saying, "God help the next man who sits in this chair who knows less about the military than I do." So I like Dwight D. Eisenhower. He's not on Mount Rushmore. I feel like he's got to rank pretty high because he actually did a pretty good job, despite, like you said, America being a very divided, segregated place overall. But you got to look at his accomplishments and say that he tried to at least steer us in the right direction.
Okay. You know how there's all these stories about Lyndon B. Johnson, like, showing everybody his dick all the time?
Yeah, that guy's pretty cool.
Jumbo is what he called it. Jumbo was LBJ's dick's name. And he'd like take shits in front of people and stuff like that. Always, all this. Anyway, like, you know, any things like that about any other presidents? You know, anything that's in that kind of vein? I don't know how to classify that exactly, but just something that's like, you know, kind of wild idiosyncrasies that somebody had. Because everybody knows about LBJ and his dick. But what other things like that were there? You know? Well,
everybody knows that Jimmy Carter he used to love banging Rosalind in the ass. That's no, I'm just kidding.
Does everybody know that?
No, nobody knows that because I made it up. That's a made up fact.
That's pretty. Yeah, Jimmy Carter, real big into anal.
Yeah.
Man, he ain't looking great. He's still hanging around somehow. Have you seen him lately? You seen him this week? He's like 100 years old, and
100 years old.
He looks it.
Yeah. Well, and he's officially like the longest living president ever. I mean,
that'd have to be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Reagan made it to like 94. Even John Adams, way back in the day, made it to 90 years old. So good on Jimmy. He's 100, and I know he voted by mail. He wanted to vote for Kamala. But yeah, he's been in the hospice care for like months, years now. Yeah. So it's fascinating. Just, I don't know. A lot of people say he was like a bad president, but a good person.
Right. That's the line on him. Yeah. Good man, bad president. That's what most people say.
So I'm always rooting for Jimmy just hang around for as long as he wants. I don't know if I want to look at a picture of him, but the fact that he's still here does give me like comfort. Because some of the guys who are bad people and bad presidents, you could argue Lyndon Johnson, he did a lot of good domestic policy stuff. Lyndon Johnson did. And the way he got it done was by intimidating his rivals, right? Like, come to the bathroom, let's have a meeting. Right. And then he whips out his dick or like sits down and starts taking a shit while literally having a serious policy discussion with the top Republican senator. But Lyndon Johnson, he did not live long after his presidency. I think he was, even his, arguably, kind of like Joe Biden, Lyndon Johnson was kind of in failing health, but Lyndon Johnson, until Joe Biden announced he wasn't seeking re-election, Lyndon Johnson was the first sitting president who could have run for re-election and opted not to way back in 1968. So Johnson's a fascinating figure. Whipping out his dick, yes. Great society policies, yes. Also started Vietnam and made that big mistake, also yes. Fascinating. Maybe killed Kennedy.
Yeah.
Probably yes.
Also, very early on in his career, he straight up stole an election in Texas, like bought and like gangland techniques to basically purchase an election in Texas early on. It's like, between that and Vietnam and all the weird JFK stuff, it's like he's clearly not an angelic figure, but he also did a lot of incredibly needed and laudable things too. I mean, the goddamn Civil Rights Act and all that. So He's
Yeah.
probably one of the most, I guess, nuanced, or I don't know what the right word is, but
Oh, yeah.
a lot of
Nuances.
layers to
A lot of
LBJ.
layers. Yeah. A lot of layers. And if you got through the layers, he had a big old jumbo down there.
Big old jumbo dick.
Yeah.
Best and worst first ladies of all time.
Ooh. Well, I mentioned Rosalind.
Yeah.
I like Rosalind. Rosalind kind of set the standard there. I mean, she had to follow up after Betty Ford, and I think Betty Ford was kind of more famous for the "I got a problem and I'm gonna help other people with problems get help."
Right.
But Rosalind, I think, kind of was more of that. I'm going to do good deeds, right? And honestly, before that, I mean, Jacqueline Kennedy was kind of famous for making the White House look amazing. Obviously, holding down the White House while her husband was all over town doing whatever he wanted to do. But yeah, before those kind of first ladies there, the 60s, 70s, going into the 80s, first ladies didn't have that many responsibilities. I say Abigail Adams, kind of going back all the way to John. I mean, she was a very, very supportive wife and partner in terms of him trying to start the Republic and then save the Republic and then serve the Republic. Abigail Adams was really big. Yeah, I'd say those are probably some of my tops. In terms of worst, well, James Buchanan was the 15th president. There's arguably a lot of people think he might have been our first gay president. He didn't have a first lady. I think his niece served the first lady responsibilities. So, no disrespect to her, but obviously she wasn't technically a first lady. And then, of course, a lot of people say Mary Todd Lincoln. She was the one who wanted to go to the play, apparently. But also
So a lot of people holding that against her. What? No, a lot of people say, what about Mary Todd Lincoln? Was she got a rip? Like
she was crazy. She was a little crazy, and didn't do Lincoln any favors while he was trying to serve the Republic, save the Republic. The same way John Adams did, and obviously even more so for Lincoln. So some people would argue Mary Todd Lincoln, but also a lot of that was brought about by the fact that one of their sons died early, and she apparently that hit her real hard. So
I sure did.
You never know what people are dealing with. That's what it always comes down to. But I appreciate a good first lady, and if depending on how this election goes, I'm fine with seeing a first gentleman in there. Finally, men will get their chance to serve as the first lady.
Yeah, long time coming. I wonder what his pet project will be. It's like there's that became like a traditional thing, right? It's like a first lady. She's got like a thing, a pet. Remember, Michelle Obama's thing was like, kids shouldn't be so fat, and they're like, give us back our cheeseburgers, bitch.
That's right. Yeah. She wanted kids to eat healthy. Laura Bush had education. Nancy Reagan had the say no to drugs, which is thanks for that. That really worked out nice. Pretty sure the war on drugs won real big
time. One of the most crushing defeats in the history of war, I think, delivered by drugs in the war on drugs. She wasn't the first lady. She was the second lady. But I keep talking about John C. Calhoun. His wife, Floride Calhoun, huge bitch, just so you know. She sucked. So.
Good.
She was vindictive and awful. But, Nancy Reagan. You said earlier Jimmy Carter liked to fuck Rosalind in the ass.
Completely made up fact. Yes,
I know, but it made up fact. But they say that Nancy Reagan was the throat goat.
Throat goat. Yeah, buddy.
So,
yeah.
What do you know about that?
It was in a rap song. Well, apparently that's how her and Ronnie met on the MGM lot. Yeah, that's
one way to rope a president in, buddy. Fucking.
Yeah, well, and Sinatra, and she was busy. And it's so funny because it was like a rap song that referenced her, like. Busier than Nancy Reagan on the MGM lot or something. I mean, and then it kind of just hid there. But then this was in the last few years, an actual established fact that got proven with historical records. So much so that I did this comedy show back in Columbus, Ohio, where they make everyone bracelets based on the news of the week. And I'm proud to say that was the week I got a Nancy Reagan bracelet. That I wear for good luck at Well, if you probably saw me wearing this at our shows in Ohio. But that was the week that the news confirmed that Nancy Reagan, she didn't just say no to drugs, she said yes to dick.
Yep. Love it. All right. Well, I think on that Nancy Reagan sucking dick note, it's time for us to call it. We've been at it about an hour, and I think I've kept you long enough. I appreciate you filling in for the show. Travis, if you want to tell people stuff, if you got anything you want to plug or tell people about, go ahead and do that.
Hell yeah. Well, I'm at Travis Irvine USA on all social media platforms, with the exception of TikTok. Never figured that one out and don't have time to now. And of course, check out my documentary, American Mayor, available at AmericanMayorMovie.com. That's something I was talking about when I was doing the shows with Trae in Ohio. It is my way to try to get everybody to run for local office. Let's start building the bench so we can start taking down some of these psychos who are running for office. I know Trae's got a lot of good people that are his fans. So American Mayor is just a documentary about me running for mayor of my hometown. And even if you don't win, you can save your parents' house and make your community better. So that's what we're going to try to do.
All right. Thanks, Travis. And listen, guys, you can see me this weekend. I'm in Appleton, Wisconsin. And then after that, I got Maryland, Philly, New Jersey, Phoenix, Northern California, Nashville, Tennessee, and Chicago, Illinois, rounding out the year. But there's plenty more dates in 2025 already booked and coming your way. So go to TraeCrowder.com, check them out, come and see me. And I guess that's it for us this time. Cho will be back next week, and I plan to be here with him. So until then, stay fancy, motherfuckers. Skew. Here's Lydia Loveless.
1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Royalty and rednecks are alike. They both like cutting and picking fights. Biscuits and baked beans where they don't belong. Sit on down with Corey and Trae and learn some fancy shit today. We'll laugh a little even when they're wrong. They'll take you to a magical place where if you call someone a cunt, nobody cares. They keep it debonair at putting on airs, putting on airs, putting on